Hello there, as I work on the final character basics guide, which will still be a little bit, I wanted to put up this smaller video as a holdover while I work on that. So here we're going to talk just a little bit about notations. By far the biggest topic for comments on the channel revolve around notations. Many ask simple questions like what does such and such mean, some say the guides are too hard because it sounds like too much jargon, and some try to jump in with additions but seem to misunderstand terminology and mechanics. The guide videos on this channel are not meant for someone who has literally just turned on the game for the first time. They're meant for players that have at least mashed the buttons, maybe played a few matches or messed around in practice mode, but most importantly, they're for players that have introduced themselves to the Tekken competitive scene and understand that there is a consensus about the language that we use. So if you're not there yet, this is a very quick primer to get you started. We'll do notations first, then frames later. Now we're not going to go over all notation, although the screen caps you'll see here are from the Wavu Wiki, and this page is a fairly comprehensive list of all notations. Link is in the video description below. I highly recommend keeping that page saved if you're just starting so you can go back to it if you run into anything new. That being said, there are some very basic things you should know that will pop up not just in my guides, but in pretty much all guides, and this is stuff that is not in the game itself. For the attack buttons, we use 1, 2, 3, and 4. If you need to combine them for a simultaneous input, you use plus, so a right grab would be 2 plus 4. In writing, we of course just use the plus symbol for that. For directional inputs, we use the actual directional words, so up, down, down, forward, etc. In writing, we actually shorten these to just the first letter of the word, so up is U, down forward is DF, and so on. If the letter is capitalized, you hold that input. You'll see other directional shorthand as well, so QCF stands for quarter circle forward, which is the down, down, forward to forward sequence. You'll see this with the half circles as well. CD or crouch dash is also a very common term in Tekken. This is the forward, neutral, down, down, forward sequence, although some characters may have their own versions, yet we still call them a crouch dash. Thanks to the implementation of 2D characters, you'll also hear the DP or dragon punch terminology now and then. Sidestep is SS, and you can further narrow it down to left or right with SSL or SSR. Sidewalk is the same, but with SW. BT is back turn. FC is full crouch, which is just your crouching status. WS is while standing, which is the moment you rise from crouch into standing. A lot of moves are done in that moment. WR is while running, which is just your running state, and we won't go over them, but there's also shorthand for all of your various grounded states. Note that commas are normally used to separate inputs, although not always. It's normally assumed that if a special character like a plus sign isn't there, then a comma is what should be there. Omitting the comma can help cut down on typing a bit. Now for some fun ones, if you need to press two buttons, one immediately after the other, so not quite at the same time, we call that a slide input, and we use the tilde for that in writing. If you want to delay, we use the less than, greater than symbols. A colon indicates a just frame, which is an input done at a very, very specific time, usually a window of just a couple frames, and we'll talk about frames here in a few moments, by the way. An underscore means or, which is useful since some moves can be done with different inputs. And at this point, we've more or less covered the basics. Any terminology beyond these are going to be for specific circumstances or character states, so you'll pick those up along the way. For example, CH for counter hit is very common. NC for natural combo is another, which means that if your attack hits normal, your follow-up attacks are also guaranteed. Normal, by the way, just means non-counter hit. NCC means natural combo on counter hit, so the same as before, except the move has to hit counter hit to guarantee the follow-ups. And there are a bunch of others. Just always be mindful that there's a lot to the Tekken system, so if you hear something unfamiliar, just look it up. I'm sure Wavu Wiki will have your back. Okay, this leads us to frames. This pops up in conversation a lot because it's a very convenient way for us to measure time. The game by default outputs at 60 frames per second, so one frame is 1/60th of a second. Even if someone bootlegs it to make the game run at 120 FPS or something, as far as conversation goes, we always assume 60 frames per second. So the first way we use this is to measure speed. Your basic garden variety standing jab we say is 10 frames, meaning that it comes out in 10/60ths of a second, or also 1/6 of a second. Now we do also have to consider directional inputs, and this is very important, so make note. We have a special term called impact frames or iframes, which measures the time from the moment you press the attack button to when the move comes out. Using the Mishima God Fist as an example, no matter how fast or slow you do the directional inputs, when you press 2, it will take 11 frames for the attack to come out. So for that, we say the move is I11. However, the directional inputs do matter. You can't do the move without those, so for DJ, the fastest the move can be done is 14 frames. But you may have instances where you want to delay the attack since you have a pretty big window to press 2 and still get the uppercut. In that case, the actual attack is still going to come out at I11, so nearly as fast as a jab. More practically, you also have to consider buffers. A buffer allows you to do inputs during recover periods, and the game will hold those inputs, for lack of a better term. Then, as soon as your character is done recovering, the inputs will happen. Many command grabs function this way, so a common example is after landing an attack, either hit or block, if you buffer your command grab, the iframe speed is all that matters, even if you have a bunch of directional inputs or whatever beforehand. Note also that the I here is different from other places you might see it. If you see something like IWR, that means instant while running. So different context, different meaning. Going back to the in-game frame tool, if you use this tool, you might notice that sometimes it gives a range for speed. Most attacks are active for just one frame, the impact frame, but some are active for multiple frames. This is really common for homing moves, for example. This larger active window is almost always useful because it means that the move lingers, which typically means it's less likely to whiff and will hit more consistently. The other thing you'll hear a lot about is the plus or minus of a move. This refers to your situation after a move executes. Your standard jab is normally +1 on block and around +8 on hit. In other words, if your jab hits, you recover 8 frames faster than your opponent. Or put another way, you get an 8-frame head start. 8/60ths of a second might not sound like a lot at first, but given the quick speeds of moves in general, an 8-frame head start is huge. Even a +1 on block means a lot. Even more so if you're heavily negative. This is usually referred to as punishable, but take for instance a move that's -12 on block. That's not just bad recovery, that's enough time that your opponent gets a free counter attack, also simply called a punish. Normally, if someone says a move is negative, it's assumed that they mean on block, since it's fairly rare for a move to be negative on hit. But these plus and minus numbers are important because they allow you to design setups purely with math. If I'm +1 after a jab block and I do another jab right away, I win if you try to jab me back. The big exception to the math, and this is the last thing that we'll talk about, are all the various unique mechanics that allow you extra time or similar. For instance, a crush, which happens as a move is starting up, will completely evade certain kinds of moves. If I do a low crush and you do a low, even if the math of the situation says you should hit me, my crush status might let me cruise right through your attack. Armor moves work similarly, they just let you absorb the damage without a hit stun rather than let you evade the move. But all of this is the fun meta aspect of the game. Many things can boil down to the simple math of a situation, and if you're trying to develop your own setups, that's definitely where you'll start, but all of the other quirky, evasive aspects of moves let you go way beyond that. Then you'll start to experience the back and forth as opponents try to counter those setups. Regardless, I'm hoping that this primer helps some players that are maybe a little confused by certain aspects and jargon of the guides. When Tekken 8 hits, you can expect more primers before I do any T8 character guides, because I want beginners to really level up as fast as possible. To me, that helps the community as a whole. As usual, I've included resource links in the video description below. Note that I have already done a multi-video series going over the various T7 system mechanics. If I have to recommend a starting place for anyone just picking up the game, please start there. The character guides will then make a lot more sense. As always though, I wish you guys the best of luck in your training. Stay with it, and I promise that you will see the rewards. And with that, thanks for checking out this video. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications here on YouTube so that you get alerted when a new video drops. Twitch and Twitter links are also down below. Lastly, huge thank you to our patrons. The more support we have, the more resources we can devote to channel content. So again, I can't thank everyone enough for considering supporting the Patreon. Stay safe everyone, and we'll catch you next time.